welcome to episode 116 of The Route presented by White Whale Marketing. The Route is a glorified sports business coffee chat that has a new guest every episode as they share their experiences and route in sports. As always, I'm Christopher Nascimento, and let's get into today's episode. So, as always, just a few quick things to cover before we get into today's guest. If you haven't already, check us out at The Route Sports on social media. If you're watching on YouTube here, you can see at The Route Sports and the different platforms we're on. Check us out there. In addition to that, you can also follow us on all social media channels, whether that's Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, etc. Good place to check us out. We have clips. We're also posting when the episodes are coming out and who's there. So you can see these unique magazine covers and find a creative way to kind of maybe introduce yourself to one of the guests. So check us out there and follow us on all audio and video platforms. With that said, we can now get into our guests. But before then, let's just do a quick message from our friends at BetStamp.
Damn it, I lost another bet. I always do this. Why can't I win at least one?
Need an edge in sports betting?
BetStamp allows you to compare the best available odds among sports books. To get an edge in sports betting, download the BetStamp app and use the code WHALE to get access to all the affiliates and pricing. The only way to get an edge in online sports betting is by having accounts with multiple sports books.
Yes.
BetStamp.
I'd now like to welcome someone who has worked for the Ottawa Senators, selling CHL partnerships, and now being the director of partnerships at Golf Canada, and one of my mentors, Dave Vladars. Welcome to The Route. How's it going?
Hey, Chris. Thanks for having me. Yeah, things are good. Things are good. Golf season winding down, but it's all right. That means we get to take a bit of a rest here.
Good stuff. Good stuff. All right. Well, we've discussed this podcast in a couple of our chats, so I'm glad I've had you on now. And I guess to kind of begin, just take me through your route. So where did maybe you begin, and how did you get to the position you're in today?
Yeah, 100%. Kind of think like a lot of people in this industry, it's been a journey to kind of get here. And for me, if I'm going to go way back to the start, I did my post-secondary education at Laurentian University, did the sports administration program. SPAD, as many people in the industry have probably heard of it before. And my uncle graduated from the program back in 1981. Shout out Doug Rose, and he ended up in the sports industry himself. He ended up becoming a lawyer and did a lot of great things in his career. But he kind of was the first one that introduced me to the program. And I always was huge into sports growing up. Played kind of every sport under the sun, but also knew I wanted to kind of get into a business career. And the fact that I could kind of marry those two together was pretty appealing. And, when I was kind of going through my post-secondary options in high school, I was kind of looking at all the usual ones, but going up to Sudbury kind of stuck out as, a unique opportunity in that it is the only school in Canada that offers an honors Bachelor of Commerce specialized in sports. So we kind of hang our hat on that, if the sports side of the thing doesn't work out, you can always kind of rely back on your Bachelor's of Commerce degree, which a lot of my classmates did. But I was lucky enough to get an internship during my time at school with IMG. Now it's since been acquired by WME, a global sports media marketing giant, and had a really good experience there, working on the media side of things. Worked with kind of an early mentor of mine, Peter Sizem, who is a legend in the sports media industry and has done consulting and broadcasting deals with pretty much every major sports organization across the country. And opportunity to learn from him and how to carry yourself and be a professional, and also got do a lot of cool things there. IMG is very wide reaching with kind of their hands in the sports and entertainment industry. And so that was great. And that was a great way to start my career, and made a lot of good connections and made a lot of good friends that I still am connected to this day. Like, I think kind of for me, then my path kind of detoured a bit there, where I finished school and had a really kind of set kind of route really that I was going to take, like most would. Great internship, school went well, graduated, boom, on to the next one. And just for whatever reason, just didn't happen. The right opportunity didn't come up. Kind of spent that summer after school, kind of trying to find that perfect job. And a lot of different opportunities came up that I think I could have run with and had success. But ultimately, I kind of had that one role in mind, which, I think for, other people coming into the industry, it's, that's my big piece of advice is don't take that one role that you think is perfect. Just because you go a certain direction doesn't mean you can't circle back. Because I think that's unfortunate. I wish I kind of had that advice at the time. But it all ended up working out. I ended up starting out of sport. I started in the nonprofit industry, doing sponsorships for a global event called World Skills, which is essentially like a Olympics, but for skilled trades. And so instead of, swimming, there's auto body repair and carpentry and welding and hair design and you name it. It's a massive global organization that, promotes skilled trades kind of under the guise of competition. And so Calgary hosted the international event in 2009, and in 2007, I was given the role of director of sponsorship, and fresh out of school, was actually given an opportunity by a fellow alumni from the SPAD program and moved out to Calgary, didn't know anybody, and just jumped on the opportunity and had an amazing 2 years running up to World Skills. We moved over $10 million worth of cash and in-kind sponsorship, a substantial amount for the start of my career. And the event was a overwhelming success, 150,000 spectators, mostly school kids in Alberta, kind of used to promote skilled trades, because at the time the oil and gas industry was, still booming, and they were looking for skilled trades people. So that was a great experience. And kind of coming out of that, it was a contract position, obviously, kind of like anyone that would work the Olympics or any type of event. Once that was over, my contract was up. And so at that point, again, it was that kind of itch. Okay, I want to get back into sport. Like, I did my time, was really successful. Now's the time. Same regards, really enjoyed my time in Calgary, but, born and bred in Ontario, missed friends, missed family. So kind of was looking at coming back. So was weighing some options in Calgary, weighing some options in Ontario, and ultimately just had a really appealing offer come through out of sport, but with what's called Skills Canada. So if I equate it to the Olympics, where I was just working for the Olympics, this would be like the COC. So Skills Canada, their mandate is to run national competitions and promote skilled trades and technology in Canada on an ongoing basis, just not outside of these global competitions. And they had never had someone in-house running sponsorship. And so they brought me in. I moved to Ottawa from Calgary, and yeah, did that for about a year and a half. But again, just that like itch wouldn't go away. And I think for anyone that has, done their education in sports business or sports marketing, they get it. Like, you get out of the industry, it's like, you want to get back in. And I think sometimes, life gets in the way and doesn't allow you to do that. Luckily, I was in a position where I could take a risk, and was able to kind of leverage some connections and get an interview with the Ottawa Senators during my time there, and was put in a position to jump on with the Sens, and a little bit of a sponsorship, more on the kind of ticket sales, suite sales, more local advertising. But went and joined the team at the Sens, and that would have been I guess 2011, 2012, and had a really good year there. Learned a ton, and I mean, I think I look back and it was an interesting year for sure. Kind of getting my feet wet on the ticket sales side of things, which is a much shorter sales cycle than sponsorship that I was used to. A little bit more kind of hit the ground running. 40 calls a day. Shout out Chris Atack, who I think is at OSEC now. I mean, taught me a ton, and just really helped kind of strengthen my sales skills. Where I was used to a softer kind of selling, kind of strategy, where it was a longer term sell, versus this was you close business on a daily basis. So really enjoyed that. Great year, really good run. I think the Sens were the 8th seed that year. They ended up losing to the Rangers. I think they took them to 7 games, first round of the playoffs. But was just like a phenomenal run, and to be a part of that team and an organization, and my first time being part of a professional sports organization where you feel the passion, and compounded by the fact that financially, the longer the team runs in the playoffs, the better off it is for you. I mean, you've got so many kind of emotions pulling at you. So it was a really cool experience. And but unfortunately, in that off season, NHL lockout hit. in the sense as most NHL teams had to do, had to lay off, furlough a bunch of staff. And so kind of put me back in the open market again. And I spent a little bit of time in Ottawa at a smaller marketing agency called Valpak, which did some local advertising marketing solutions. And at that point, again, it's kind of, careers kind of up and down, unfortunately some bad breaks. And you got to make, again, some major life decisions. And luckily, my girlfriend at the time, now wife, was super supportive of us, potentially moving down to Toronto at some point. We'd always chatted about it, and an opportunity kind of fell in my lap with CHL Properties, which is the sales and marketing agency for the Canadian Hockey League, and was able to land the job based on my experience and success to date. And so we picked up and moved down to Toronto, and really that was like the start of a kind of thing for me, kind of where my career is at now. A super strong run, a really great team there, and a really strong property. I mean, I grew up in London, Ontario, so I was a London Knights fan and really believed in the strength of junior hockey in the OHL and kind of what it meant to communities outside of the GTA, and how impactful it was. And so the opportunity to sell corporate sponsorships against the OHL, WHL, QMJHL, Memorial Cup, was special and something I embraced, and was just a phenomenal place to work. And I left briefly for a year to test out another opportunity, but ended up coming back and spent about, I guess, all in all, 5 to 6 years there, and learned a ton, and just, I think really helped refine my sponsorship selling strategy. And, we had the advantage, obviously, of being an outside agency, so could, try a lot of different things and be aggressive. And, really led me to this point, which again, kind of coming into COVID, things were a little bit muddied again. And, I think for anyone in their career can attest to, it's been tough for everybody, but I think from a sports perspective, a lot of uncertainty. And, luckily this opportunity where I'm at now came along, and the opportunity to work for Golf Canada. And at that time, there was a lot of uncertainty in golf, not from the sports perspective, but from the events. And, just a kind of a briefer on what Golf Canada does, the National Sports Federation for Golf in Canada, but also is the, I guess you can call it owner and executor of the RBC Canadian Open, the Lone PGA Tour event in Canada, and the CP Women's Open, Lone LPGA Tour event in Canada. And so those are two major buckets. And so the opportunity then to come to Golf Canada and be a part of, something really special, they had missed out in 2020. I had been personally at the event in 2019 at Hamilton Golf and Country Club, and they were already doing some really cool stuff with the RBCX Music Concert Series. They had Florida Georgia Line there, and I just knew it was a monster event, and had a really great CP Women's Open at Magna Golf and Country Club here in the GTA. And so they had so many things looking up, and then not to mention we had just gone through the first summer of COVID, and everybody was golfing. And so I knew the sport was in a really good place. I knew eventually once we got out of COVID restrictions, the events would be in a great place. And so luckily enough, I was able to kind of come through as their chosen candidate and help lead their sponsorship team. And so my role now is, very business development focused, very execution focused. We've had a really good kind of 2 years in bringing in a bunch of new partners to the sport. Again, just based on the success of, the growth of the sport, and then obviously where our events are. And then we just finished a tremendous 2022 calendar with the return of the two national opens, and record numbers at St. George's Country Club, over 135,000 fans, great repeat champion Rory McIlroy. And then we just finished off the year in Ottawa with the CP Women's Open. You were lucky enough to attend, and we got to walk around a bit, which was great. And again, record attendance numbers there. The Brooke Henderson factor was live, and lots of fans, soaking it in. So we're now looking forward to a great 2023 with the RBC Canadian Open at Oakdale Golf and Country Club here in North York, and the CP Women's Open is out in Vancouver. But yeah, that's a really kind of long-winded kind of how I got here, how I kind of got to this position. So it's funny at verbalizing it. You don't do that very often. But the last time I did it was maybe do an extent during the interview process for Golf Canada, but you kind of realize what a kind of crazy ride it's been. And so, yeah, it's been fun.
Yeah, I know that's what almost every guest when they come on the podcast are like, oh man, like that was long-winded, but then they kind of realize like everything they've done over the last however many years that they've been in the sports industry. So no, that's kind of what the whole podcast is about. But no, that was excellent. And what I'd like to do too is now go all the way to the beginning, and then we can kind of work our way back. You were touching on your program at Laurentian. I didn't even know that it was an honors bachelor's, whereas everyone else is kind of, I think, HK, right? Human kinetics.
HK or like a management science degree or something. Yeah.
Yeah. No, so that's kind of something cool that I didn't even know about. And for those listening, right, it's usually those that are maybe trying to get into the career of sports and doing switching, depending on which degree would make sense, or even those looking to start attending school. I think that's kind of a key note there. But was there any ever doubt of where you'd go to school or what you were going to study, right? You touched on your uncle. Is that something where once you heard that, you're set, or were you ever kind of considering other programs, other schools, different things like that?
Yeah, I was considering a bunch. I kind of, I was down to either I think I'd settle on, based when I got my acceptances through, I was either going to go to Laurentian or do the, can't remember what the designation is, but whatever, the business commerce degree at Laurier, which I know is super strong. And funny enough, my younger brother ended up going there and doing that program. But yeah, I think at that point I was pretty undecided. I mean, it was I think it's daunting, for anyone to, move away from home and go to university. But to do that up in Sudbury, which was a 6-hour drive away from London, versus going to Laurier, which was, less than an hour. It was kind of, you're trying to weigh the pros and cons. And I think ultimately I had to kind of, I think my vision then of what I was going to do is different now. I definitely didn't think I was going to get into sales. But I think I ultimately knew I wanted to work in sport. And so that was kind of the route I wanted to take. And, that's probably at that time I thought was the path of least resistance of, sure, I could go to Laurier, but how do you spin that into kind of sport? But, I think it was the right choice. I think, the friends I made, we actually just saw a bunch of them a couple of weeks ago. SPAD just had its 50th anniversary. There's a big gala event here in Toronto. But yeah, the friends I made through the program, of which some are still my best friends to date. I think we're all kind of, going through kind of a common, as most people do at school, but a kind of a common experience of, far away from home up in Sudbury in Northern Ontario, and just kind of going through the motions of going to school and all this stuff you have to deal with. So it was a good decision in the end, for sure.
For sure. No, that makes a lot of sense. And you're just about to touch on like the vision they initially had, right? Where how funny enough that always changes, right? When I was speaking to someone earlier, just kind of referring to sales, right? Where I remember I keep bringing this up. I was in this course. They asked everyone in second year marketing who wants to be in sales. No one puts up their hand, right? And then funny enough, how many people that end up studying marketing end up in sales. So what was that initial vision that you did have when you were at that program?
Yeah, I initially thought I was going to get into accounting, and either maybe hit up sports from an accounting angle or a finance angle. And then it was probably through first year stats and accounting and stuff at school, and I was like, yeah, I'm not getting into numbers. I would much rather get into marketing, or once I kind of got a little bit more educated on the industry, partnership marketing was definitely of interest, and the opportunity to work with corporate partners. But I think even then, the vision coming out of school was, we chatting about this, I think, the vision was execution, service side of things, strategy. When you come into school, sales is a bit of a dirty word. You don't really want to get into sales. It's a lot of pressure, it's a lot of expectations. And I think, it's something where I think a lot of people coming to school aren't really looking to take that angle. So I kind of got pushed into it. I wouldn't say it wasn't a choice, but I think the opportunity that came out for me ended up being in sales, and I'm glad I took it, because I think it's, I've even surprised myself sometimes just in base of, I don't really consider myself a super type A personality. A little bit more laid back, and I think I've proven myself that you don't need to have that kind of type A go personality to have success in the sales game. I think the ability to be strategic and sit back and kind of pick your spots is also got value as well. So yeah, it's funny to go from thinking about being an accountant to being in sports sponsorship sales, but here we are.
That's funny you say that, because I never knew that about you, and I was kind of the exact same thing. I started in school for accounting, and then I worked an accounting job, and I just had a switch where I was like, no way, I can't do this for the rest of my life. And same type of thing where flip into sports marketing and partnerships. So I get that. I think there's quite a bit of people actually that kind of come on the podcast. They always think they're going to go into accounting, and then it kind of switches it. So no, that's interesting. And then afterwards, you're talking about, leaving school, kind of finding the right opportunity, and it didn't come up. And I think that's something that a lot of people can relate to, right? Where whether it's myself or a bunch of other people, you're going for, I remember I was applying for marketing manager roles, and I had no experience or very limited experience, or like you're saying, you want to be a part of the servicing side, not much into the sales. What kind of things were you applying to, and what really kind of maybe allowed you to be like, okay, you know what, this is going to be the one I'm going to go for?
Yeah, I think it was that. It was a lot of marketing roles, a lot of kind of account manager roles, those types of things. Finding that kind of, right fit in sport. I think, again, it is, especially when you're breaking in, it is such a small industry that, there's only so few opportunities that come up. And then I think even more so now versus when I graduated, there's just such a volume of students and new graduates and new programs that are coming out that is a lot of people competing for very few jobs. And so, that's kind of what I was applying for, exactly that, marketing stuff, account managers, kind of partnership marketing, coordinator roles, comms roles, kind of anything tied to marketing or comms in relation to sport. But it's, as I said, it's super competitive. And, even back then it was, 15 years ago, it was super competitive. So I can only imagine how competitive it is now, that I feel like every university and college is coming out with an undergrad or post-grad, certificate in sport. I mean, when I graduated, it was really Laurentian. Brock was obviously still strong. And then the George Brown program was really strong from a post-grad perspective, but that really was it. And now it's, I run across people. I feel like every school in Ontario has got some form of a sport marketing program. So a lot of people that want to get in the industry. So I think it just goes back to, don't be selective. If you get a good opportunity that you think can get you your foot in the door, then take it. Because ultimately, like any industry, it's so small. Like you need good connections, and so you need to start somewhere. So that's always my advice, because I know for sure I struggle with it.
No, I definitely agree with that. Where I think we've kind of chatted offline about this, right? Where a lot of people, as you're mentioning, they have these different sporting degrees, or they even I'm in the process, as of interviewing people, and a lot of times they're maybe some of them are just coming on the calls and they're saying, hey, I'm a huge fan of sports, or they'll say I have 15 years of sports experience just because they watch sports for their childhood. So from your perspective, are there any things, whether it's you at Golf Canada or maybe in your previous experiences, where like, hey, this is something that I've noticed for new grads where they stood out? Is it kind of being willing to bite the bullet and do maybe a sales type of role that they might not have wanted to do, or is it their initiative, or like what types of things stand out to new grads?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I think it's funny because sure, it helps to be a sports fan, and sure, it helps to know, and you need to know a certain sport, know the property, but I think of people within our organization, or even people I work with in the past in the hockey world, who, extremely talented individuals that are really good at their job, that aren't the biggest hockey fanatic or the biggest golf fanatic. End of the day, it's business, right? Understanding, especially our side of the business, how to deliver value to partners and, execute on agreements and all those types of things. You don't need to be the biggest golf fan in the world and know every single thing about every single PGA and LPGA tour player, because ultimately, our partners don't, as much as they're probably golf fans, they don't care about that. They care about, driving value and ROI. So I think, that kind of always makes me cringe when people are like, oh, I'm the biggest golf fan. Because I'm like, I really don't care. Like, I care more about, like, are you passionate about sponsorship? Are you passionate about sports marketing? Are you passionate about thinking of cool, new creative ideas that we can, use to integrate into partnership agreements? Like those are the things that I'm always looking for, bringing new ideas to the table. I think it's funny, because I think a lot of people, and again, it's like, and you get it too, because you've been in it, like it's people from the outside still view like the sports industry as like, the sexy industry, and it sure, it is at times, it's cool. But I mean, a lot of times it's grinding, it's weekends, it's events, it's long hours, the number of hours and steps we put in at the RBC Canadian Open and CP Women's Open, like it's a grind. You're working 16, 18-hour days from top to bottom. Doesn't matter if you're a coordinator or a director or a VP. I mean, everyone's all hands on deck. So you want those people that are committed. Sometimes I find those people that are the sports fans are maybe not the right person for the job because it's not, I think, again, it's all kind of in the lights and it really isn't. So.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. Where, like let's say using my experience, right, where I didn't necessarily decide to go to the sports angle for a degree because, sure, it's kind of a safety belt as well. Because if I couldn't end up getting a job with a specific team, an honors bachelor's of commerce is still very applicable to every other business there is. But I think that's sometimes what kind of stands out to maybe some people, I've met with, where I think those degrees are great. Well, then kind of understanding you're not all going to become Kyle Dubas or, end up, just because you're a fan, that's something. I think the ability to understand the business, the value you're providing and how that ends up working and wherever you are, I think that's super important, right? Because whether you played in high school or not, that doesn't really have a factor anymore. It's more so you're like, what are you going to do to provide value to the specific team you're on? So I think
it's about sacrifice too. It's funny, because you brought up that point about wanting to be the next Kyle Dubas, and I don't know him personally, but I know of him. Kind of flies under the radar a bit. But the newest general manager of the Chicago Blackhawks, Kyle Davidson, is actually a Laurentian graduate, SPAG graduate. So, but it's funny. I think about my first day at Laurentian, went around our sports business class or whatever, intro class. And I ran out to say kind of what their dream position was, and the people, I want to be the GM of the Toronto Maple Leafs, or I want to be the GM of the Montreal Canadiens. And not saying it wasn't attainable, but again, kind of similar to anything, like the grind, the sacrifice, like the hours those people, like the hours that Dubas would have put in working for the Sioux, and just hundreds and hundreds of hours in cold minor hockey rinks in Northern Ontario just to do proper scouting. So I think it's whether you're doing that or whether you're doing sponsorship, it's a fun industry to work in, but it's not always fun and games.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. And for me personally, I know when I was met with someone, they were like, hey, I want to be a GM. I was like, oh, well, I can't do that for you. Like, regardless of how big my company gets, I'll never can provide that to you. So sometimes just understanding where you are. But yeah, one of the things you touched on earlier too was just in regards to a network, and it's kind of a cliche, it's cheesy sometimes, where it's all about who you know, but it really is kind of at the end of the day. And I think you touched on that's how you kind of got back into sports, right? You're talking about your position with the Senators, you kind of leverage your network. So how did that work out? So maybe the people listening can kind of think of ways they can do it themselves.
Yeah, and that was good friend of mine, Andrew Stokes, who's at Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment. He introduced me to a partner of his who was also a partner of the Ottawa Senators, and we had lunch. It was kind of I feel like it was like a vetting lunch, so we hadn't met before, but he connected the two of us, and we had a great lunch, and then he put my name forward, for one of the new sales roles with the Sens, and so obviously I still had to interview and show well, but I mean that definitely helped, versus me just coming coldly off the street and applying for the role. So having that kind of internal referral from a partner, it helps. So I think it's finding those connections, wherever they exist. And I think I always find, and my advice to people is don't be afraid to ask. It's kind of similar from a sales perspective. You got to ask if you want to get a result. But from a connection, everyone, if you're respectful and polite and, are professional about it, I think you'd be surprised, the things people are willing to do for you. You just need to ask, right? So I think I've always kind of taken that and again, being respectful about it, but trying to connect those dots and who can connect me to who. And, it's even easier now with LinkedIn, but, I think again, it's you just got to ask and you got to be, kind of polite about it. But I think as I said, you'd be surprised what people are willing to do for you if you're courteous to them.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of a great example of that, where I kind of know with my business, and I think even, having calls with you or even asking you for advice or even kind of other people, right? And I was chatting with someone about this morning, was I really noticed a big difference once I kind of, let's say, put that ego down of, hey, I don't feel comfortable asking this question because I don't have enough to prove or value or et cetera. But then I think a year and a half ago, once I decided, hey, you know what, let me just push that down and ask questions and ask people to connect me with someone else. That's really when I've noticed like, hey, like things are starting to pick up. So I can definitely agree with that for sure. And then as you know, you kind of went along with the Senders, then you were mentioning how you moved on to the CHL properties. How did that come about? Was that something similar as well, where it was through a partner you knew, maybe someone else that was working there? How did that start?
Yeah, well, I knew, I knew I wanted to get back into sponsorship. I, had that experience in the ticket sales side of things, and it kind of reconfirmed, although it was a great experience, that's not the type of selling I really want to be doing. It's more so the more strategic kind of longer sales cycle, larger partnerships. So that kind of helped confirm that. And I saw the opportunity. The opportunity came up. They were looking for a couple new sponsorship sellers with CHL properties. And again, matter of connection. Like I applied kind of coldly, but one of my colleagues at the Sens had actually moved on to a role with the organization as well on the account management side of things, and she had been able to pass my resume forward. So again, kind of warm connection. So that's a bit of luck for sure. But I think again, it's testament to like keep your connections warm and your network warm, and don't be afraid to reach out to people and just say hi. And lucky enough, that helped me get the initial interview, and then I was able to take it from there. So, I think of all the times I've had that kind of happen for me, where there has been that kind of warm connection. And I just think of how impactful that is versus if you're just coldly applying for a role. And I get it, you're not going to have a connection everywhere you go, but I think, if you can just somehow create that third kind of party introduction, it's so helpful, because it just validates. Because I mean, especially in this industry, like I see it now when we've hired a couple of roles this year, and just the volume of applicants we get is staggering. And so obviously there's some resumes that stick out regardless, and you're going to interview them. But I mean, if there's somebody coming through with kind of a warm connection, and their resume kind of, meets your goals as well, then they're going to get an opportunity, because you're going to kind of trust the people that, can provide those kind of opinions for you.
Yeah, no, for sure. That makes a lot of sense. And I don't know if you want to get into it, but you kind of mentioned that role in between, right? When you began at CHL Properties, then you went to SBX, and then kind of came back. Do you want to maybe touch on that? Because I know when you kind of shared that with me, and just about how that sales kind of worked, I know that was kind of beneficial for me to even hear.
100%. And I kind of ran through that quick. It's just complicated kind of process, but I mean, I had a great year there, working with the team at SBX, and Danny Fritz, who owns the agency. I had met when I interned at IMG, and they were a young agency looking for some sales support. So I jumped on and had a good year. And, I think from a success perspective, I think it was successful in that I kind of realized it wasn't the right fit for me. Honestly, didn't have a great year, selling wise. And so it was like, okay, like, dude, maybe it's time to move on. And luckily there was still an opportunity waiting for me at the CHL, just based on the success I'd had there and the year and a half that I'd been there. And I kind of called my sabbatical, because I came back and they still had my computer and all my emails and everything. And so I just whipped the computer open and got right back at it. And that would have been in 2015. And I stayed there all the way until almost 2021. So it was a good move for me to go back. And I think, as I said, I was using that opportunity at SBX to kind of hopefully skip up the ladder, because there was some more leadership opportunities there to work with the team. And I think I thought I was ready, and was more so just ready, prepared to go back, and we're just really focused on selling a little bit more. So, looking back, it was I don't regret making the decision to leave, but I think I learned a ton, and was happy that obviously it worked out and was able to head back. So.
Sure. No, it makes a ton of sense. And then I guess, like one of the things you're then touching on as well was just how you're able to kind of develop. Like, was it something where it was a newfound appreciation, or was it just kind of maybe that different perspective you now gained from working somewhere else and then coming back to it?
Yeah, well, I think it gave me appreciation for the property. I look at they had a lot of great things going for them, but it was a tough sell on some of the assets we had within their platform. And I look at the CHL kind of platform and just kind of was able to appreciate kind of the depth, the scale, the scope of the kind of CHL and 52 teams across Canada. And the opportunity to allow brands to leverage themselves. So that was for sure kind of the big one. Is just, again, I think you can't always be selective where you work from a selling perspective, but I think you also got to be somewhere where you believe in the product. And I was so, and I still am, a really big believer of, as much as they're going through some things, obviously in the market with junior hockey, and it's by no means perfect. And I think they're hopefully can get themselves on a path to kind of, obviously sorting out from a cultural perspective. But I think in terms of like what they do in the local communities and what they mean to local communities and bring them together, that doesn't change. And I think that's something that I truly believed in. And I think we were able to extend that on to our brand partners and allow them to tap into that kind of community spirit. So, and that's kind of carried forward to Golf Canada, and just, really believing in the two major events we run, but not only that, just kind of what we do at a grassroots level, our amateur championships across the country, our growth of the game, our junior golf initiatives, First Tee, which is come up to Canada now, is a huge philanthropic part of Golf Canada and the Golf Canada Foundation. So I think it's also, important. It doesn't need to be a high profile platform like Golf Canada. It can be anything, as long as you kind of believe in the product and are willing to kind of fully invest in it, then I think you're better suited for success. I think of some of the times in my career, when I was kind of selling against something that I maybe didn't truly not believe in, but wasn't fully invested in. And I think kind of the results kind of, showed. So I think that's something as well, as I think you need, from a selling perspective, you need to have passion for the product, because it'll show in your results.
Yeah, no, for sure. I remember when you kind of mentioned that to me, and I thought that was like a huge thing, right? Where, sometimes just in regards to how that aligns to you and what you, believe in or are passionate about, or what you trust, right? And if this is something that you think is valuable, then it's much easier of a sell, right? Whereas if you feel like you're selling something that doesn't make sense or you don't think is there, then that's a tougher sell, right? Because you just don't have that belief within you.
Well, because I think in a lot of times, especially in our industry, people are buying our product, but they're buying us as well, and that we're kind of, we're putting that on a platform for them, and they're trusting us. You're building that relationship, and they're believing in us to deliver on it. And so, it's obviously selling 101. But I mean, if you can't believe in a product, you're not going to properly put it in front of them in a way that they're going to buy in on it.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I guess kind of getting to your current role now, right? You're talking about how when the pandemic came about, there's a lot of kind of question marks in the air. But then how did that transpire? Then how did you get into this current role today?
Yeah, so it was just good timing in that, we were kind of hunkering down at the CHL, preparing for, as we canceled the Memorial Cup in spring of 2020, which was really too bad. I mean, we were set to, we were, I guess, a couple months away from being in Kelowna for what was just going to be a really special Memorial Cup. We had a lot of great stuff planned. And that went into a really tumultuous summer, and us trying to work with our partners to, renegotiate agreements and find value, and, how do we cap off, the 2019-2020 year with no Memorial Cup happening and playoffs ending early, and then really into, like, as it was pretty apparent that the start of the 2020-21 season wasn't going to happen on time, starting to plan with partners as to, like, what are we going to do? So it was and then from a employee perspective, it's kind of, what does it mean for us, especially us, on the sales side, who are dependent on, deals carrying forward. So that puts a little bit of question mark in our future. And we're kind of preparing to hunker down for probably a quiet year, just knowing that, crossing our fingers there'd be hockey at some point, but knowing that there may be a bit of a wait until at least, early 2021. And just lucky enough, this opportunity came across my desk, was approached by a recruiter, and who was working on behalf of Golf Canada, and was kind of put in the process, and, a lengthy process like a lot of these roles are, and luckily came out as I mentioned before, obviously as the candidate to take on the role. And so, that in itself has been extremely interesting. I started it's almost been 2 years. I started in December 2020, middle of the pandemic. As I said, the health of the game could not have been stronger. I think they did record rounds played in the summer of 2020 because it's really all you could do was go outside and play golf, as everyone remembers. But from an events perspective, it wasn't looking good. They hadn't run the two major events in 2020. And, after I started, it was becoming quite clear early into 2021 that, they probably wouldn't be holding, either event in 2021 as well, just based on border restrictions, vaccination restrictions, all those types of things. So, it was kind of round two of pivoting with partners in terms of figuring out how do we still provide value. How do we alter agreements, payment, all that type of stuff through 2021. So, it was an interesting summer. It was kind of beneficial in two ways, allowed us to get creative with our partners and try some new things. And then also, from my perspective, a business development perspective, gave me a lot of time to get into the marketplace and, really introduce the organization to a lot of new brands that maybe hadn't heard of, no, obviously had heard of it, but hadn't really been pitched it before. And a lot of great new partners that came on that put their trust in us. And so through 2021, it was a lot of new business development work. And then it was really as the kind of, a year ago now, as we kind of got to the end of the year, it was starting to, okay, things are looking good for 2022. We're starting to feel very comfortable that we're going to be running these two events next summer. And it was starting into planning mode, and that carried through the spring of 2022 into the RBC Canadian Open that happened in June. So it's been a pretty whirlwind 2 years here. A lot of different changes, but we've got a fantastic team and continue to bring in just, unbelievable talent to the Golf Canada team. So we've got a pretty strong team here right now. And I think we're on this kind of rocket ship trajectory of, the health of the sport now is still super strong. Now the events are back, and we've had 2 record events in the last year. And kind of what can we do now in 2023? How do we get bigger? How do we get better? It's only upward from there.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And before I kind of wrap up the interview, I just kind of thought of a question that kind of came to mind, which I don't even think I've asked you personally yet. Obviously, I attended the CP Women's Open and kind of gave me a walkthrough around it. But then there's also the RBC Open in Toronto, right, where you had that big activation with theScore, right, where it was kind of all over social media, it's all over everywhere. Do you want to maybe touch on how that came about? Because that was something that was huge, right?
Yeah, that was amazing, and kudos to the team over at theScore. And on that was their idea, and that's something they wanted to do. And a lot of kind of things I think had to kind of come into play to make that a reality. It was luckily our title partner at RBC was supportive of it. I think we were kind of waiting for someone else to tell no, but the PGA Tour was supportive of it, which was amazing because it's something that hadn't been done before. And then even more importantly, our operations team was supportive of it because they definitely it took up a lot of a big footprint in kind of a key operational area at the golf course. And St. George's, unbelievable golf course, such world class, but it's in the middle of Toronto, and it's a tight facility, and so we didn't have a lot of extra space. So to make that happen was great. But it really goes back to the vision of theScore and kind of wanting to do something large and impactful, which it was. And obviously, we saw the value in it, with all the additional media that it attracted. And similarly, we had a really great activation from our partners at Hilton, who did the Hilton on the Green, and they actually had people that stayed on the golf course in a makeshift Hilton hotel room. So a lot of cool things. And that's what we're looking for in partners. Like, obviously we look for partners that provide financial support, and we provide value back to them, but also looking for those partners that are looking to do cool, impactful activations that are kind of change the game. So yeah, it's kind of now looking at 2023, like what are people going to do next year? Like, so I think there's some cool things cooking in the hopper, but it'll be fun to see. And the advantage we have next year at Oakdale is that it's a large property. We got a lot more to work with, so it's going to be fun to see what we can come up with.
I know that should be exciting to see. Yeah, and I guess just kind of wrap up the podcast episode. The 2 questions I like to ask everyone at the end. So we kind of went through your whole route so far. And I'm a big believer that I'm going to live until I'm 103 years old. So with that, I'm going to be on a rocking chair thinking about all the good times I've had at White Whale Marketing. But then for you, let's say you get to 103 as well, and you're on this rocking chair. What's one story to date that's going to stand out to you when you're on that rocking chair at 103?
Oh man, like on my career, like
Yeah,
like a
like
fun
just
story.
whether it's at like the CHL working like a Memorial Cup event, or maybe it was even this past RBC Open with the score, or maybe just something stands out. We're like, wow, I can't believe I got to do that for work.
Well, I think early in my career, like super cool experience when I was still an intern at IMG, and obviously the opportunity to kind of be a part of something like that was the Teleskins game out at Banff Springs. And so for anyone that's been out to Banff Springs is such an iconic course. And I look now at kind of the personalities that were there. Some a little bit controversial in golf now. Greg Norman was there. Jack Nicklaus was there. John Daly and Sergio Garcia. Then the Canadian representation was Stephen Ames. And so for those that aren't familiar with the Teleskins game, it was an event that IMG ran for years. That was kind of a one-day kind of celebrity skins game that was on TSN. And to look back at now, and all those guys are still active in the golf industry, but just kind of the different paths they've taken and kind of the shenanigans that happened at that event. Like I think of the time when during the Pro-Am, when John Daly thought it'd be funny to bomb a drive over top of Sergio Garcia's head as he was 300 yards down the fairway, and the reaction that Sergio had, which I wouldn't say was very friendly, but really cool stuff that I look back, started your career and kind of help fuel the fire for me to be in this industry. And yeah, a lot of other cool stuff's happened kind of along the way, and opportunity to kind of rub shoulders with professional athletes and whatnot. And it's cool, but I think you also get to realize they're just normal people too, right? That are just kind of put in these extraordinary situations. So
For sure. No, that's awesome. And I guess the last question I'd like to ask everyone is, we went to the future, you had 103, but then we went back to Dave at Laurentian. You're about to start school. What's one piece of advice if you could travel back in time to provide to a young Dave that you've now learned, right? Is there one thing that kind of sticks out to you? It's like, wow, I wish I knew this then, or this is something that all 18-year-olds or all young professionals should know?
I think we talked about a bunch of those things throughout the chat here. I mean, just network as much as possible. I mean, I think one thing, I super enjoy getting to know you and just kind of, helping you out with your path. But I think one thing would be like, maybe work on finding, a few mentors, because I think that's something where I've tried to do a little bit more of that, because I didn't really have much mentorship. And so I think, again, helping have that advice to kind of guide you in the right direction coming out of school. So, again, I think it's something I encourage anyone, like, that's early in their career is, approach that right person. And, I think it's a bit of a daunting task if it's not through kind of a formal program or what have you, but trying to find some of those people that are willing to be a mentor to you. And I think you'd be surprised if you're willing to ask, and that people are willing to give you some of their time and kind of help guide you in the right direction.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with that. Where I think for myself, that's been huge, even like meeting you and some of the other people I've been able to meet and kind of just pick their brain, fairly consistently throughout the year. But yeah, it's a crazy task, right? Where sometimes just putting yourself in that vulnerable position, and sometimes when you meet with them, there isn't that alignment. But when it's there and the ability and that experience you can pass on, it's huge for sure. So I definitely agree with that. But yeah, no, this has been fantastic. Episode 116. Unless there's anything else you'd like to add, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. That's amazing. Episode 116. Kudos to you. Great job. Fun to chat. Yeah, thanks for letting me share my story.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's it for this week's episode.